Hey friends, welcome to episode 545 of the My 123 Cents podcast. I haven't said it in a while, but that means we're just 74 weeks away from episode 619. And I know Ray's got a little time on his hands, so maybe Rey Mysterio will eventually appear on the show. Fingers still crossed for that. Or Dirty Dom now. He is a champion. We're going to talk all about that in just a few minutes. Joining me once again, Chad Smart. And Chad, I didn't want to necessarily do a quote unquote WrestleMania recap show, but do more of an expectations, because we were talking before we hit record of some of the expectations and some of the criticism really of WrestleMania 41. And I guess we'll just start right out of the gates. How did you end up watching WrestleMania? Did you watch it by yourself? Were you with a group? How did you consume this year's event?
I watched it with like my hands covering my eyes. I was like, "Oh, I don't want to see this." No, yeah, this is why I'm glad we're not doing like a full recap type thing. Although I'm sure we'll probably recap more than we expect to.
Right, exactly.
But I don't like giving like ratings to these shows because I watched it alone. I watched night one. I started about an hour and a half late, which thankfully on Peacock I could still rewind to the beginning and watch it straight through. But night two, I did watch. I split it up over Sunday night and Monday morning, watching the replay. So I'm watching by myself. I'm watching late. I'm sure had I been watching with with at least one other person, my expectation may have been a little bit, or my
experience
thoughts on it might be a little bit different. And especially, being if we were there live, it would have been different. So I don't feel like if I say, "Oh, this show was great" or bad, either way, it's probably not an accurate reflection. And I'm glad we've also had a week to, kind of process everything and take in other comments and thoughts, and maybe think of that, pointing out things that we didn't think about, or just get overexposed to the negativity of this aspect, so where we can be like, "Okay, was it really that bad or not?"
And as we always talk about too, wrestling, specifically WWE, is a continuous story. And so I feel like Raw and SmackDown did kind of add a little bit more context to things from this past week, and maybe some high spots that we can elaborate on as well as we talk about this. But I often wonder, for you, you watched it, like you said, on streaming services, and you watched it, you were by yourself, and you watched it kind of delayed. So you didn't even have the social media interaction. On Saturday night, I did watch live, and I watched and was interacting with folks, Tyler Hatton from Stride, we were Snapchatting back and forth. And I think you eventually got caught up, because I feel like we snapped, but maybe we didn't.
I snapped you late. I mean, I was still about an hour behind.
Okay. And then, with just getting on X or Facebook and kind of interacting with fans, to me, that's kind of become the new way of watching pay-per-view or watching PLEs or wrestling in general, even on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays and Saturdays. that interaction, you may not be with a group of fans, but you're at least still engaging. That's why a lot of people, I like this on-demand idea because I can watch it whenever I want. But if you're really into the social media and into that engagement with other people while you watch, to me, it's important to watch, and there's only a handful of shows that I want to watch live every year. Royal Rumble and WrestleMania are really the big two. Night two, again, I went to PK's here in Southern Illinois. It's a bar in town. And I was supposed to host an event, but there were just a handful of people there at the beginning. And then eventually more people got there. And as we were talking before, you're engaging and kind of talking back and forth with people, but it's not obviously the same as being there. And it's not the same as really watching with a group of people that and kind of, because sometimes the level of fandom is different and people are like, "Oh, blah, blah." So anyway, was it because of this card not exciting you that you didn't watch it live, or do you have other things going on, other things that you deemed more important? And with it being Easter weekend too, I think that crimped a lot of people's viewing, because even though we're tried and true fans, if there are things going on, we went up to St. Louis on Saturday and spent time with my wife's family, and I didn't say anything, but I was like, It is
Mhm.
WrestleMania, and when I saw the time and we were getting in the car to leave, I'm like, sweet, I'm going to make it home in time, and I'll be able to watch all this and be unscathed, if you will. So, but yeah, was there a reason you didn't watch live?
Yeah, well, first, I think you need to start doing watch along live YouTube videos so that you can get put into the recap packages on Raw or stuff. You can,
There you go.
and also because I think people love watching someone else watching TV that they can't see on the recap
Right.
video.
It's
Which
so weird.
again, I mean, there are several people that do it, and I know they're popular, but I don't understand the concept of watch
I'm with
along.
I'm with you
Um,
100%. Yes.
I don't know, and again, maybe that's just our age, and we're not part of that generation that does that.
Yeah.
So, but the reason why I didn't watch live was a little twofold. One, I didn't feel like there was anything that I needed to watch live. Um, I didn't expect any big, I guess, big moment that I didn't already see coming.
Hmm.
Um, and there's some, I was with my girlfriend. There's been some stuff going on in our personal lives that we were handling. So it was just more of I can watch this when I get home. And again, I wasn't because I wasn't watching with anybody. It would have been different if maybe friends had said, "Hey, let's come over and watch WrestleMania." Or I had looked into. I'm sure. I think they played clips of it on WrestleMania. A place
Yes.
called Cosm.
Hmm.
COSM, where it's this gigantic screen.
Yeah.
But when I looked into getting a ticket at that to get a reserved seat in the actual place where you can see the screen, it was $275. And I said, I will sit home and watch WrestleMania for $9.99 or $5.99, whatever I'm paying for Peacock. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's insane.
yeah.
They did cut to a couple clips of that, and it looked like, and I'm curious what it is because they kept calling it immersive experience,
Mm-hmm.
and so if anyone out there happens to see this or hear this, because I didn't see any like social media post or all I ever saw was what WWE had posted, and I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
they
Yeah, I mean, I've looked
what the
into, like I
experience is
said,
really like.
it just looks like it's a gigantic, like, let's say, theater screen,
Hmm.
but you're right next to it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
like
and
they were
and
like in the because at first I'm like, wait, what is going on here? When they showed the clip because I
mhm.
didn't have the sound on, and I'm like, and then I was like, okay, I get it
Yeah,
now.
and from what I've seen too, I don't know if they have like a static camera that's watching, or if it's getting the feed,
Mm.
from WWE, because everything I saw just had like one camera shot.
Hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of those experiences, let's talk
Mhm.
about this before we get deep into this. Something I noticed this year that I've not noticed in previous WrestleManias is fans were actually, or I'm assuming they were fans, were seated on the
The
stage.
stage,
That's kind of a cool experience, don't you think?
yeah. As long as there are no pyrotechnics that are coming out,
Yeah.
right at that. Yeah, and I did see a couple of look like influencers or people that do WWE content
Hmm.
were up in there. So I don't know if those were
Yeah.
sold seats or if those were special VIPs or
Yeah.
who. But yeah, I thought, and I'll say I was disappointed in the staging. I'll get your take, but I was hoping. I mean, I thought the seats up there were kind of cool,
Hmm.
but I was hoping for more of a Vegas themed set. Like I would have loved like a giant slot machine that like kind of had the wheels spin to show the whatever match was coming up, or something like that. This one just felt like a giant rampway with a tall building.
Well, and I don't know, and I'm looking to see if I can find it, and I
Hmm.
don't see it, but on one of the Conrad podcasts, actually all of them, because he talks about this on all of them. Apparently, they had a set built or a set ready to go, and
Hmm.
at the 11th hour, seemingly, um, the hotel or the place where they held Hall of Fame and
The Fontainebleau.
yeah, the Fontainebleau wrote a big ass check apparently to have the set design changed to look and reflect more of that facility. I
Uh,
don't know if that's true. That's what he said on his podcast. So I did like the different.
the
You could
hanging,
see the what's that?
the hanging
Yeah,
screens above.
the hanging screens. Yeah, I almost said banners, but
Mhm.
they were, obviously digital. And I guess since we're talking about it now, entrances always seem to kind of be the thing about WrestleMania. Um, my personal favorite was Tiffany Stratton's. I thought it
Mhm.
was a clever way to bring her out and
Mhm.
give her, her WrestleMania debut, and she's the women's champion. And then she got kind of that VIP treatment, if you will, with the video screens and the Barbie stuff.
Mhm.
So because I do look at those things and watch it. And when we're there, it's always interesting because they're like, why are they, when you're watching at home and there's a long delay or there's a video
Mhm.
package, I think sometimes you forget they're like, it's kind of like the Super Bowl halftime show. They're moving
Mhm.
shit around and trying to get the next state, thing set up and
Mhm.
ready to go and doing it safely and quickly. Um, knock on wood, other than the
Steve Austin. Yeah.
Steve Austin incident, we've never really seen any kind of major catastrophes that have resulted from that. We'll get to Steve Austin here
Mhm.
in a few minutes too, I'm sure. But so kind of setting the table of how we watched, how we consumed it. And again,
Mhm.
I do think that influences sometimes your viewpoint, if you will. But what did you think? And again, we said we're not going to analyze every single match, but we probably
Right.
will at least make some comments here and there along the way. But some of the big ones, and obviously when you went into WrestleMania, and we're talking
Mhm.
about expectations, let's talk about the four primary championships: men's, both men's world championships, or I don't know what they're calling them now, WWE championship and world championship, and then the women's side of things. So those four titles.
Mhm.
I will say I was disappointed Chelsea Green wasn't on the show, and maybe we'll talk about her in a little bit with SmackDown. But um, I could have theoretically seen all four of those championships changing hands. I'm glad that they didn't, but
Mhm.
I did actually think all four could have changed hands, and I thought that the one that was the most likely to change hands was Cody losing to John Cena, which we
Mhm.
obviously saw. What were your expectations of those championship situations?
Uh, yeah, I figured Cody would lose. Figured Jay would win. The women's titles, I'd hoped that Tiffany would retain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I put out on social media that match, Tiffany and Charlotte, was actually my match of the night for night
Mm-hmm.
one.
Yeah.
And I think, part of it was due to the rumors, the speculation that they weren't getting along, that they had that shoot promo on each other. And so the match wasn't bowling shoe ugly, but it wasn't flawless either. And
Yeah.
so I think that added to the aspect of the match.
I
But
thought Ric Flair had hijacked your account when you said, just kidding.
um, but yeah, I'm glad that Tiffany retained. I
Yeah.
don't think Charlotte doesn't need the title, and her and Becky should go off and uh, cosplay as Hulk Hogan on their own. I'll talk more on that later. Um, and then I really wanted Bianca Belair to win just to
Yeah.
keep her streak
Yes.
going.
Yeah.
But I think with the story that was being told, Io Sky winning was the right choice because she had been the third wheel
Mm-hmm.
in the story where she's the champion. So
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Bianca even, did Bianca take the pin or was it Rhea?
it may have been Bianca. I don't recall.
I don't remember either. And I'm wondering, I'm going to go back and look because I wonder if they'll set it up to where if she didn't take the pin, I mean, I know she took, and I guess she actually lost. There was a women's battle royal one year too that she was in that. Um, but yeah, I thought, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Oh, it just says Io Sky defeated Bianca Belair and Rhea
Yeah,
Ripley.
because I can't remember if Rhea had Bianca ready for the pin when Io came off with the moonsault, or
Yeah,
if it was the other way around.
if it was the other way around. Um, but yeah, so Jey Uso, I figured he would win, but then I also, people were talking about the aspect of the chase and whatnot. But I think that ended up being an okay match for me. I
Yeah.
was very surprised though by how quickly Gunther tapped out. Um, I think that would be my only criticism of that was how quickly he slipped him into that sleeper hold and then
Yeah,
tapped
but I
out. I think
guess
there would have been more drama attached had he like faded and held on and then, but again,
yeah,
what?
but I guess what it was 3, 4 spears and a splash, and
Mm,
apparently Gunther has a history of tapping out early. I think Ilya Dragunov got him to tap before, but I don't recall that. But yeah, I was kind of the same way where I thought Gunther tapped a little too quickly. But again, given the everything that he had taken, I guess it works. And to be critical, I think Gunther is kind of when you have someone who is as dominant as he has been, you can't keep them dominant all that way. And
mhm.
so then they have to lose, but then you have to find that fine balance of the dominance also being beatable. And
Yeah.
and I look at back at like the Giant in WCW who came in and won the title on his first night, and then what do you do once he gets beat? Same way with Goldberg. So, and then now that Gunther's been suspended for getting revenge for everybody, like I said, who had to sit through Jerry Lawler and Michael Cole at WrestleMania 27. We'll see what happens when he comes back.
I think it's interesting, and we're kind of jumping ahead, but I think it's interesting, and I want your take on this too. Traditionally, with WrestleMania in the past, at least I'm going, and maybe this is a Mandela effect, but it always felt like if the title changed hands, then the champion would get a rematch at the next pay per view. And you're kind of setting up then for the next feud or whatever
Yeah.
after that retention. This year, that's not happening with the men's championships because Cody Rhodes isn't around right now, and we're going to see Randy Orton in that spotlight in May, and then Gunther has been suspended, as we mentioned. So obviously, there's not going to, or I'm assuming there's not going to be an immediate rematch for Gunther either. So, what do you feel about the fact that we're seeing maybe not the traditional post WrestleMania feuds and matches at PLEs?
Yeah, I think they've been phasing out the automatic rematch over the last year or so. It doesn't seem
Yeah,
like that happens as much, which I think is a good thing.
yeah, I do too. I agree.
Because yeah, Backlash always just felt like WrestleMania redo,
Yeah,
and WrestleMania is supposed to be this big show, and then you just you redo it again a month later, and it's like, okay, well, why was that one so special and this one isn't? So yeah, I think especially looking at John Cena and Randy Orton, you have the history there. The pay per view is in St. Louis, which we talked about. I thought about coming back for going to, but we didn't want to spend the thousands of dollars for tickets to the show. Um, but yeah, I don't think again, like I was saying with Gunther, where Cody goes from here will be interesting to see because he has been kind of you know, the guy for the last 3 years. And now, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm all for no rematches.
yeah. Well, New Day, perhaps I don't know if they made history, but winning another tag team championship run. Honestly, I think I would have swapped this match with the match that we got on SmackDown Friday night for the tag team titles with the Street Profits, DIY, and the Motor City Machine Guns. It seemed more impactful, memorable. I love the New Day though, so no big surprises there that they won. I feel like everybody kind of had them pegged to win the championship as well.
Yeah, and this is we talk about expectations with WrestleMania, and this one didn't really outside of Cena Cody. I don't feel like there was anything that was really WrestleMania hype worthy. Not that there weren't good matches, just that the stories going in weren't all that intriguing. And New Day, the tag title matches are part of that. The New Day match easily could have been on Raw.
Yeah,
I think the TLC match, like you said, from or the ladder match from SmackDown should have been on WrestleMania, but just because the style of match that it was bigger.
yeah.
Thing. Whereas putting it, and it had it been on the SmackDown before WrestleMania, I think it would have been even better. But putting it after WrestleMania just made it kind of made it seem less than as well.
Someone who I have seen get some flowers in the wake of WrestleMania, which was kind of surprising because, again, that expectation is Jade Cargill. I think a lot of people still have her pegged as a kind of a one-hit wonder, and I know with her run in AEW, she was undefeated. She came to WWE, obviously sitting under multiple learning trees and getting the reps in and getting the skills that they need. I think people expected this match. I think they expected the result to be the way it was, but I don't think they expected her to perform the way she did. And I did feel like for a Jade Cargill match, this was pretty good. And I felt like her and Naomi went out there, or Naomi, as Wade Barrett says, and they just beat the crap out of each other. And I was pleasantly surprised with this match and the way that it went. And when we're talking about expectations, this match exceeded my expectations. I don't know. I liked Naomi's outfit as well with the caution tape. It was, I don't know if it was an intentional throwback to Owen Hart or if it was just kind of a caution, I'm going to beat your ass kind of mentality with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still not sold on Jade. I still think she's got some growth to go, but the match was, like you said, better than I expected, and her electric chair into the powerbomb move was really good. But yeah,
I think. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I do think she still needs. She's just missing something.
Do you think? I think she should be a heel. I think that may be part of what is missing. But also, do you think that we're in an era now, and I guess we'll call it the TKO era, the non-Vince McMahon era, the days of the house shows, are dwindling. I think they're doing 200 or 250 live events this year. So most, or a lot, not most, but a lot of those are going to be PLEs. They're going to be Raws. They're going to be SmackDowns. Back when we were kids, back in our day, they'd come into town on a Thursday night or on a Tuesday night or a Sunday night or, in the middle of the week, or do a double shot in, for example, when I lived in Missouri, they'd be in St. Louis on Sunday afternoon and in Cape Girardeau Sunday night to do shows. So obviously the wrestlers are not getting those reps. And on one hand, it's good because they're not on the road all the time. They're not fatigued. They're not injured and trudging through it all. But on the other hand, they're not getting those reps in to make matches that show up on Raw and SmackDown and on WrestleMania or SummerSlam look better maybe than they could be. So do you think the lack of house shows hurts the development of someone like a Jade Cargill, or maybe eventually some of these other talents that are on the NXT roster right now?
I was going to say, I think from my understanding that is kind of the purpose of the Performance Center, is where they can go and rehearse or work stuff out, but you're not working in front of a crowd.
Right.
So you can't judge what works, what doesn't. But you can, I guess, take your time, and instead of just going out and trying to do a match, you can do something, see if it works, and then how you transition into the next part of the match, or you can stop, redo. But I and I know it's been the criticism of AEW since it started, is that there's no house shows for these lesser experienced wrestlers to learn from. And it is the double-edged sword. Yes, it hurts the growth of the wrestler, but like you said, I'd rather them be healthy and be around longer to have a career than to get injured more often.
Let me talk to you about Jacob Fatu. Let me tell you something. Let me talk to you. And I didn't really mean to do that, but Jacob Fatu beats LA Knight, becomes the new United States champion. For some reason in my head, Jacob Fatu is much older than he is. I thought he was in his early 40s for some reason and just had not been discovered yet, but he's only 33. So, or at least according to Wikipedia. So I take back my earlier thoughts of him being maybe, I'm not going to say past his prime, but like in that stage where because I've heard a lot of people talk about the future and him being a main event. And speaking of the future, obviously guys like Randy Orton and John Cena and AJ Styles, they're all creeping up to that mark where we're going to be retiring soon, or maybe eventually. Roman Reigns has hinted at it. Jey Uso, even before Mania, was talking about it. So I feel like now is the time, a critical time, for WWE to start generating that new line of talent. And Jacob Fatu's name has been mentioned in every conversation I've heard about that. He is very impressive. The things that he does for a man his size, and I just look to see what his role in the Anoa'i family is, and I didn't realize he is the son of Tama, or the Tonga Kid back when Haku and Tama, because we saw Haku come out and congratulate him. So, and I don't know what Haku's relationship is in the Samoan, the Anoa'i family as well, but she's trained by Rikishi. He's cousins, obviously, with Roman and the Usos and whatnot. But what are your thoughts on Jacob Fatu? I mean, I figured he'd beat LA Knight, and where does LA Knight go from here? Sometimes when we see that secondary champion lose the belt, they then get pushed into the main event picture. The main event, though, is so seemingly crowded right now. I feel like LA Knight's going to end up one of those guys that kind of starts making that descent instead of ascending, as we probably will see with Jacob Fatu eventually.
Yeah. Well, first, for Jacob Fatu, he is impressive. I was not really that familiar with him before he came into WWE. I believe I think his biggest exposure was in MLW.
Yeah.
And I believe he's had some legal issues that kind of maybe delayed his entrance into WWE.
Yeah.
But from all accounts, he seems like a good person backstage, and yeah, I think he's very talented. I think it's interesting how Solo was, the leader of the Bloodline 2.0, but has seemingly kind of not fallen off the radar, because he's still there, and he I guess in one sense is managing Jacob, but after SmackDown, it'll be interesting to see what happens with those two. And yeah, I think Jacob just has an aura about him that the fans have taken to, and I don't know if he'll be a world champion. If this was the Attitude Era, obviously he probably would, because everybody got a shot with the belt. But if we're going back more to the golden age of good challengers, let's say, I definitely think he'll be challenging. Maybe not while Cena holds the title, unless they turn him face, which I think the fans will do by year's end. And then as for LA Knight,
face or turn Jacob Fatu face?
Jacob Fatu face.
Okay.
And for LA Knight, I was a fan of his as Eli Drake in TNA, and what little I saw of him in NWA. But yeah, in WWE, and I don't know if it's just the style or what, but I see him not being in the main event picture anymore. I see him, unless maybe he challenges Jey Uso, moves over, challenges Jey, and they can just yeet and but I don't think because I think, like a year ago, LA Knight was really over with the crowd.
Right.
And I don't know if it's, due to booking or what, but he's still getting pop, but it's not what it was. So I think either he's missing something, or the fans have just moved on, because now they have, a Jacob Fatu or a Dirty Dom, or,
Yeah. Yeah. This is the first WrestleMania that I can remember in a long time where we've had several impromptu changes before the show. And we'll get into the Randy Orton situation when we start talking about night 2 in a few minutes. But, and part of me thought it might have been a work, but it ended up not being that way. And that was El Grande Americano taking on Rey Fenix instead of Rey Mysterio. This kind of rushed the Rey Mysterio apparently got hurt at SmackDown the night before WrestleMania. And I don't know the extent of the injury. I haven't seen any updates, but did you think your expectation for this match, was it going to be because we were talking before we started about El Grande Americano. Was your expectation that Ray was going to win and unmask and pull the ruse off, or in the ruse? Or I thought El Grande was going to win and continue this on, and then we get down the road to a bigger kind of match with Rey Mysterio. But I did not expect Ray to win, either Ray to win this match.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think for the story being told, El Grande needed to win and to drag it out more until you have an official mask versus mask match. I don't, I haven't seen anything more on the Rey Mysterio injury. And so I still think it's a bit of maybe, I want to say it's a work just because the fact that they had already set up El Grande and Rey Fenix having the altercation in the Battle Royal. So it may, it was a easy transition to get Phoenix in there. Plus, he's the big, new signee, so you get him on WrestleMania. But I was surprised that they would do so and have him lose so quickly.
That was my next question. Does that hurt? I don't know much about the Lucha Bros. I saw them a little bit in AEW, but are they as will they be treated as big a deal? And I guess what we also kind of buried in the lead too is now WWE owns AAA.
Yeah.
We're seeing more luchadors coming in and whatnot. And is this to kind of reach that Latin audience and get more of a footprint? Obviously now with owning AAA, that's going to have some sort of impact, pardon the pun, on that audience as well. I would imagine.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I know there's the meme that I don't know if you've seen it, where it's like, it's in like a swimming pool, and like there's a person holding up a little kid, and it says Rey Fenix, and then there's somebody else like kind of starting to drown, and it says Dragon Lee, and then at the bottom is a skeleton, and it says Andrade. It does seem that way, because I mean, Andrade came back, thought he would be a bigger deal, but hasn't really done anything. I think Dragon Lee would have been, like I said, other than the fact that they had the El Grande Americano Rey Fenix interaction in the Battle Royal, Dragon Lee would have been the more logical Rey replacement based on storyline.
Yeah.
So we'll see, and Penta is popular right now, but we'll see in the next 6 months how things go.
Yeah. I'm really curious to see what happens with this relationship, or I guess it's not a relationship, they own it. So
and we'll see, also if they reunite the Lucha Bros for the tag team division, or if they keep them on separate brands. And speaking of AAA, like I said, the big issue I think that we'll see how they handle is the fact that AAA's champion is Alberto Del Rio, who I don't think is on the best of terms with WWE.
Well, I thought I read that he had gotten released. So,
I just know he was the champion, so haven't seen.
Yeah, I'm almost positive, like the day or two after the purchase, that it was announced.
I did see something where they said a lot of the AAA talent is not under contract.
Yeah,
but I don't know if that's true either. So,
it's going to be an interesting time to see what happens and what, because honestly, other than seeing clips online, I don't know much about the whole AAA and CMLL and one of them at one point was broadcasting on cable when we still had cable, and I was able to watch some of it, but this was years ago, and I don't remember which company it was or anything like that, and it was truly like the live or the actual feed. It was not it was all in Spanish, and they hadn't translated any of it, but it'll be interesting to see for sure what happens and what potential there is with this new ownership. I guess it's not even a partnership anymore. We talked, and I can't remember now if you said it during the course of the show or if we talked about it beforehand, but Tiffany Stratton beating Charlotte. I feel like this was the one of the 4 matches that we talked about earlier that I thought the champion had the best chance of retaining. And so, while I could have seen it going either way, I am glad, like you said, that Tiffany retained and is still the women's champion. And they went almost, just over 19 minutes. It was, again, it wasn't pretty, but it was not horrible. And it seemed more grit, and there was a bit more realism to it. Tiffany, I think some people thought she had chipped her tooth. I think it was just blood that was on her tooth. It came out later that was the case, because I think there is a stereotype, good or bad, that you have these attractive, some of them surgically enhanced blonde talents that they're just in there as the eye candy. Which 20 years ago they would have been treated like that, but I feel like they went in there and they put their all into it, and they came out better for it. And Tiffany's not just a pretty face that can't take it. And I feel like, to me, that was kind of her coming out party as the champion, and someone that I feel like has a lot of potential down the road even still.
Yeah, I think this is the match that I may have Snapchatted you while I was watching it, and they came out in similar looking pink gear.
Yeah.
And they'd been on, like, I guess they wore similar clothing on their SmackDown promo. And so that was, fans were like, if they want to be different, or, she wants to separate herself from being Charlotte. But I said, I thought it was just a good throwback to WrestleMania 9, the double doink look. So at least somebody got to do it this year.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I do get the criticism that Charlotte is always in the title picture, and especially for being out injured for a year, coming back, winning the Rumble, and going straight into a title match. I think I know you were disappointed, and I think we'll get it now, maybe a Backlash, but Nia Jax maybe should have been the one to be there based on the story that had been was told with this. So, but then again, maybe putting Charlotte in there was a sign of good faith, and they knew that Charlotte could help her have a better match.
Yeah,
at WrestleMania. So,
do you think that we're experiencing Charlotte's descent, or will she continue? Will she, I guess, now reach 17 and perhaps 18? I think she's at 14 now, right?
Yeah,
championships.
So, I hope not. Again, I just, 17 championships in 7 years, or 14 championships in 8 years. It's overkill. I think it also kind of just shows the unimportance of titles, in wrestling right now. But again, will I lose any sleep if she does get 17? No. But I think Charlotte needs to do, and this is, something where not having the territories, I think, is a hindrance to wrestling, because instead of just going out with an injury for a year and coming back, I think a lot of wrestlers need to leave one promotion and go to another promotion.
Yeah.
And wrestle there and then come back. And, they can freshen up their act, or at least be in a different setting. And I think Charlotte, there's rumors about Bayley possibly leaving in a year when her contract is up. But I do think, we've talked about The Miz, who's been in WWE for 20 years. I think he, even though he's a double Grand Slam champion, I think he could have benefited from a change of scenery at some point.
Yeah. Main event of night one. And we talked about this on the podcast last week or the week before last. I guess it was the week before last when we were talking about the build to WrestleMania, and that's Seth Rollins beating Punk and Roman Reigns, CM Punk and Roman Reigns. Yeah. Even though Heyman was in Punk's corner, was still the wise man for Roman Reigns. I had said it felt like they were setting this up for Seth Rollins to walk out with Paul Heyman, which we ended up seeing being the case, and then eventually getting to Raw, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. Was not surprised by this. I did like how they did it. Because I even though I kind of thought it was going to happen, I didn't know how they were going to get there. I do think Paul Heyman's nut shots are a little weak looking, but who am I to criticize? But I overall enjoyed and I do think the crowd was legitimately surprised. It seemed that way, and in the actions of the wise man Paul Heyman.
I've said it, I'm sure, before on the show, or at least I've said it to you off camera. I've never seen a Roman Reigns match that made me want to watch another Roman Reigns match. This continues that trend. I think because the climax was very predictable. And I think even with Seth Rollins, his promos, quoting Heyman, that's not a prediction, that's a spoiler. And maybe it's because I was watching the match so late at night that I just wasn't invested. But yeah, the turn was like, oh, okay, yeah, they did it. And I said on the show 2 weeks ago, the story going in didn't make sense to me. The story coming out of it also doesn't make sense to me. We'll see where it goes. But yeah, expectations again. This was it was a fine match to not main event WrestleMania, but well.
So do we agree night one's match of the night is Tiffany Stratton and Charlotte Flair?
That's my match of the night for night one.
I agree. I agree with that. And again, I thought Tiffany had the best entrance too.
Yeah.
And again, we're talking expectations. Night two, I expected either Bianca or Rhea Ripley to win the championship. I'm not disappointed that it didn't happen because, again, I think as fans, we expect it and then it doesn't happen and then we automatically hate it and it's the worst WrestleMania ever, or it's the worst match ever, or it's the worst decision ever.
Yeah.
But again, the way this story has unfolded, it did make sense. And I thought, at one point, I thought they were going to actually squeeze Io out of the match. And go with just Bianca versus Rhea Ripley, which I think would have been a banger as well. But I think this match was really, really good. And again, we're talking about kind of some trends that came to an end with this year's WrestleMania. I think, and someone will correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time a WrestleMania has ended, in recent years at least, without a Royal Rumble winner being involved in it. I could be wrong. I could be totally speaking out of my ass right now, but I know, the last 2 years, Cody won the Rumbles and was in the main event. And so I know it covers at least up to that. And then COVID year, it was Drew McIntyre. So it's interesting to me that Bianca Belair went and won the Elimination Chamber. To me, it felt like the Elimination Chamber was more important this year than the Royal Rumble. And maybe I'm wrong, but I do think night two of WrestleMania was better than night one. And I think that this match is part of the reason why it was. It was a good match, I thought.
No, I'll agree with you. Night two definitely felt more like WrestleMania to me. And this match, I believe, the almighty Dave gave it 5 stars, and which I believe is the first women's WWE match to get 5 stars. So obviously, that the match is one of the greatest because Dave says so.
Yeah.
But I agree. The match was exactly what I expected out of the match. And as we alluded to earlier, said the outcome was a bit of a surprise and a happy surprise. Hats off to all 3 women involved that they went out there, they opened the show, which, you want to have a good match to get the crowd invested. And I think they did that and maybe set expectations a little too high for the rest of the show.
I was going to bring that up too, because let's look back, previous years. And I don't really feel like it wasn't until WrestleMania 10 where that opening match became such a critical, maybe indicator or predictor or expectation setter for the rest of the show. WrestleMania 1, it's Tito Santana and the Executioner. And now WrestleMania 41, it's Io Sky and Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley in a championship match. And it was the same as night one. It was Jey Uso and Gunther in a championship match. So as often as we criticize the champion not going on last, I think sometimes, and especially when you have 4 different world champions now in one company, going on first is sometimes just as critical or as important, and you may even have more eyeballs on you going on first than going on last. So the main event concept is ever changing and ever evolving, and I feel like though the ladies lived up to the expectations. I think, and both women's matches were better than the men's matches in my opinion. So
and again, you throw in Jade and Naomi, and I think all 3 women's matches were definitely better than the women's match. Well, at least one of the women's matches we got at WrestleMania 22 when we first attended. So I'm looking at you, Mickey James, and Trish Stratus.
Drew McIntyre and Damian Priest, it kind of was what it was. I didn't really have any expectations for this one. I figured Drew would win, but
so let me. This will be my main complaint with this WrestleMania, and it has nothing to do with Drew or Damian. It's going to be totally separate from the actual wrestling. I've had this line in my head, so I got to get it out so I can use it. At the last AEW pay-per-view, at the press conference afterwards, Toni Storm comes out, says she has a poem. Says, "There once was a man from Nantucket." Oh, that to me, and I hope you understand the rest of the poem. I won't go into it. The family show. That to me was kind of what WWE was doing with all the promotions, all the promotional. It was just like so self-indulgent in a sense that Damian Drew comes out as a character for tie-in with Doom, then Damian comes out with a tie-in with something else, and then you have Dude Wipes, and you have Wingstop, and I understand, hey, they're making money, hats off to them. I'm a red-blooded capitalist, I get it, but at some point it just becomes overkill to where I feel like the wrestling takes the backseat to the promotion.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something that I wanted to mention as well, at least get your take on it too. But
and also I think it stuck out to me, this one, because outside of something that we'll get to later in the show, I don't know if it was just because his music is so short and kept looping, but Drew McIntyre's entrance to me was way too long. I was just like, is he not in the ring yet? But again, it may just be the music being the same chord over and over.
Right. Well, and it's, I think every match was sponsored. They had some sort of sponsor. I'm not a big fan of the ring having the sponsors in it. I harken back to Vince McMahon's era of it just being a plain mat, maybe the WWF logo on it. But I don't hate it, and I don't want to sound like like you said, I'm all for the sponsorships and being able to do it. To me, it doesn't feel the same as it did when we were younger. But obviously, times change and whatnot. But it did feel a bit overkillish to me, especially the Dude Wipes, the Prime, the characters, and the alleged $1 million offer to Steve Austin to wear the Prime.
Very disappointing.
Well, it would.
I mean, I was kind of disappointed that we didn't get the Prime cameo this year that we've got in the last couple of years.
Yeah, was there not one? I guess there wasn't.
No,
I was trying to think if there was. Here's probably for me the biggest shock of WrestleMania weekend, and that is Dominic Mysterio winning that triple threat match with Braun Breaker, Finn Balor, and
four-way match.
What's that?
It's a four-way.
Yeah,
not a triple threat.
Did I say triple threat?
You said triple threat.
Sorry,
I got to call you out. Yeah.
My bad.
I
Yeah,
mean, granted, Finn's only there to take the
triple threat
pin,
with
so
four people in it.
yeah.
Braun Breaker to me again is so damn impressive, and he's kind of like on that Jacob Fatu level of I think there are obviously he's just getting started, and if the rumors of the cousin, the other Steiner brother or Scott Steiner's son coming in, I mean, I'll be curious to see, and then obviously what transpired on Raw, but. I didn't think Dominic was going to win. I actually thought Penta was going to win this one, just the way they've been building Penta up for so long.
Yeah.
I do like the fact that Dominic kind of steals the win, and I feel like he's going to end up one of those guys though that becomes so hated that he becomes popular, and I think it's already happening. So
yeah.
But man, he is so good too. I just really enjoy, and would have never guessed that little kid at SummerSlam '05 was going to turn into one of the biggest stars in WWE today.
His dad's looking down on him every day from heaven, just being like, "Oh, that's my boy."
The other thing I like about Dominic here is like I've seen him in other video clips for not WWE. I'm sure it's part of the promotional stuff, but it's not like a WWE post. And he's answering questions, and I don't remember what website it was for, but he's talking about his three favorite meals, and one of them is chicken nuggets. I don't know if or chicken fingers. He gets to the end, and he talks about he's like, being very serious and very passionate about this, and then he gets to almost out of character, but then he gets to. He's like, before she became a deadbeat mom, she used to make me this tuna ceviche dish. But, I got kicked out of the house. And I mean, he slips immediately back into character. And it was so flawless. I just really enjoy what he's doing and feel like he gets those little nips or snips in. Chris Van Vliet interviewed him recently, and he did it with Ray as well. So it's just so good what he's doing, and I think he should be applauded for his work.
But have you seen the video after the match where he's walking backstage with the title and Scott Steiner is standing there, and so he taunts Scott Steiner with the
Yes, it's so good. It is so good. And actually, I thought they maybe made history, but then I did a little research. I guess technically Rey Mysterio and Dominic are the only two father and son to win the IC title at WrestleMania. But of course, we had Curtis Axel and Mr. Perfect and Fatu or Rikishi and Jey Uso as Intercontinental champions as well. But this was the first WrestleMania transpiring of that. And again, match exceeded expectations. I liked it. I liked the story that's kind of going on with Finn Balor and Judgment Day and what's going to happen next with them. And then, of course, where does this leave Penta? Because I thought he was going to end up and we talked about AAA already. So maybe this is all kind of building up to that uniting with Ray Phoenix. Are they legit brothers?
Yes.
Okay. So, all right.
Because have you seen the video of Penta in the crowd watching Ray Phoenix at WrestleMania?
Oh, I hadn't seen that.
Yeah, he's standing like off to the side, and he's got like a bandana over his face, but for some reason fans recognized him. So,
hey, and before I get to the next match, something that they did on night one was introduce the Hall of Famers. In my opinion, and I haven't seen any real explanation, conspicuous by his absence, was Lex Luger.
I've heard, or I shouldn't say heard, I've read conflicting things. One, that he went to WrestleCon because they offered him more money. One, that he'd had, an issue, and he mentioned it in his Hall of Fame speech. He took a bump getting out of the car into the car at Atlanta. And that he'd had discussions with WWE and they knew that he wasn't going to be there. I don't know. I do think I wish he would have been there just to get the adulation. But speaking of the Hall of Fame, did you stay up until 4 a.m. to watch it?
I haven't, other than a few clips I've seen on social media, I have not watched the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, hopefully they do not do again, next year, do something different. Don't make it at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Especially since they'll be in the central time zone. So SmackDown will not get over with until 10. So it'd be even later if they did it like they did this year. But yeah, it's just way too late. Trying Triple H talking for an hour and a half, apparently way too long. They needed Kane to come out and drag him off the stage.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah.
Well, we talked about those impromptu last minute moments and Kevin Owens and Randy Orton, and which I had forgotten until they talked about it later in the night, that Logan Paul beat Randy Orton and Kevin Owens at last year's WrestleMania. I had forgotten that match existed, and again, it's that memory thing.
Logan Paul.
Randy Orton without an opponent for WrestleMania. Expectations were Nick Aldis. I read Rusev. I read Aleister Black.
Hulk Hogan.
Oh God, that would have been not good.
Flair.
What are your thoughts? Because one, was Joe Hendry on your radar? I had heard a potential, but I thought, I don't know that they're going to do that. And when they, I liked, again, the drama and the mystery of it and the unveil. To me, there were still little nuggets of surprises that weren't spoiled by the internet on WrestleMania weekend. And that to me was one of them. And everybody, even though TNA is still kind of like, this tiny little promotion, that dude is over. And that crowd popped when he turned around and the music hit. So, and he's got a very catchy theme song, which maybe should have been in the My 1-2-3 Cents Madness theme song tournament, but I liked it. And people bitched about it being a squash and he's the champion and yada yada yada. Dude, you're wrestling for TNA, which again, not a knock at TNA, but you're on the biggest show of the year with one of the biggest stars in the history of the business. Yeah. And it was 3 minutes and 10 seconds. And WrestleMania traditionally has at least one of those quick squash style matches. I don't think they do that as much anymore because of the time constraints that they don't face. But I thought for what it was, this was good. It was a good reintroduction of Joe Hendry to the world. And he even had his own shirt, WrestleMania shirt in the WWE store or WWE World. So not a bad day for Joe Hendry, in my opinion.
No, I'm trying to recall. I don't know if he was on my speculation list, but he's another one that I feel is kind of like LA Knight, where you go back 6 months when TNA and NXT started their cross promotion, and I feel like he was really over, and I believe he was in the Rumble, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. But I feel like since the Rumble, like he's kind of disappeared. And maybe it's because I don't watch TNA on a weekly basis, which as we're recording this, they're doing a show here in LA tonight. Well, I think the pay-per-view, and I will probably not be there, but I believe he is wrestling. But again, I think it was a good surprise because it's something different that we, other than I guess at the Rumble the last few years where TNA has had a presence, to my knowledge, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first non-WWE contracted wrestler to appear at WrestleMania, at least in a major
I think match. So. I'm gonna go with that.
Yeah, and again, he is popular, especially with an international crowd. I think he being from Europe, I think he has that, and so yeah, I think the crowd popped because again, the surprise factor, and we've always said that if you're in a live crowd and something, even if it's, if Kamala had showed up I think the crowd would have popped. Mainly because I believe Kamala's dead, which really would have surprised everyone. Yes. but you get that because that experience of being there live is much different than watching at home. So I think Joe Hendry got the pop that he did. One, because he's over. Two, because it was a surprise. And again, the match went 3 minutes. It's a Randy Orton match, which is still like 2.5 minutes longer than it needed to be. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with Joe Hendry. Does he show up in does he come to WWE when his TNA contract is up? Yeah. Do you think he'll show up and get another WrestleMania moment?
Yeah, I don't think we've seen the last of him by any means. AJ Styles, Logan Paul.
Next.
the carrying cross. I wasn't. I guess I haven't been following as closely to that. So you're not a Logan Paul fan, though, right?
I don't. I mean, eh. He's more talented in the ring than he should be, but I don't know him. The only stuff I know him outside of WWE is not on a positive note.
Right.
And this match was just kind of there.
Yeah.
I mean, the only good thing is Karrion Kross's promo after the match. If you saw that, where now maybe it will actually lead to something. Although, again, Karrion Kross is one of those guys that I liked him when I saw him on the Indies, liked him in TNA. There's just something about, like, especially now that he has long hair, it takes me like a good 10 seconds to recognize him when he shows up. I don't feel like he has a distinctive look that he used to have.
Yeah.
Even with Scarlett and all the tattoos, you would think, hey, this should be more obvious, but it always takes me a moment. And maybe it's just the way he's been presented up until now, but he's right now for me in WWE, he's just another guy.
Yeah. Well, is Bailey just another gal? Is she getting screwed?
Who?
Here? She and Elia Valkyria were supposed to wrestle Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez for the women's tag team championships. Bailey gets hurt, allegedly attacked or whatever. I don't remember what the story was, but and Becky Lynch ends up being the surrogate partner. Big Pop. She returns. You said something earlier about her and Charlotte going and cosplaying as Flair and Hogan somewhere else.
I said Hogan,
or just as Hogan.
Yeah.
So, are you not a Becky Lynch fan, or were you not a fan of the way she came back?
Well, it's more of she comes back and gets inserted into a title scene right away.
Yeah.
Which is the same complaints that fans are having against Charlotte Flair. I haven't seen as much against Becky, but I think there's a difference between how the fans feel about Becky and Charlotte to begin with. I wasn't a fan. I mean, the match was fine, but I wasn't a fan of the story because if they were going to bring Becky back anyway, and I guess maybe you needed Bailey there to be the catalyst to get set up the match, but to have her taken out, I wasn't a fan of it. And then for them to win the titles and only to lose them the next night at Raw, like they could have lost the match at Mania and then had Becky turn on Lyra. And my problem is with Lyra Valkyria is, she won the IC title. So she's the women's IC champ. Hasn't, to my knowledge, really done anything with that title and then gets a tag title shot. She's someone that I'm just like, it would be hard pressed for me to pick out of a lineup.
Right.
And so, we go back expectation, the build to WrestleMania. I don't feel Lyra had been built up to be in that position.
I will not disagree with you on any of those points. Yeah. Here's the one that really kind of set people off as far as expectations go. And that's, well, I guess before we do that, right before this match, I think a lot of people expected Stone Cold Steve Austin to be involved in the main event somehow. His music hit before the main event. He comes out, does his thing, announces the attendance, has the unfortunate incident with the fan at ringside.
So, real quick, with the fan at ringside, if you've watched the video, legit, or did she pull a LeBron James and flop like crazy?
You know what? I guess I didn't. I haven't seen the replay or anything, so I need to go back and, before I say that, look at it and see. But I know that Nick Khan was over there pretty quick too, and I'm sure things were being discussed about, paydays and lawsuits and all that kind of thing.
Will she now show up next to green shirt guy at every show?
Yeah, exactly. When his music hit, though, and again, here's where we're talking expectations. I expected him, because he had made a comment on social media about helping Cody if he needed help. So I thought he's going to be involved somehow at WrestleMania. But I also knew that John Cena was going to walk out as champion. I thought maybe, Stone Cold comes out after the fact and saves him from a beatdown from The Rock and Travis Scott and John Cena. That's what I kind of thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
That was my expectation. Does that make the main event bad? And no, but the main event was not good. I expected The Rock to be there, but in WWE's defense, and not that they need me to defend them, They never said The Rock was going to be at WrestleMania. We as fans expected it because there was so much buzz around Elimination Chamber and The Rock's involvement in that one would assume that The Rock was going to be at Mania. Did you assume The Rock would be there?
Well, yes. And I don't know if you've seen it, but this, granted, was not on TV, but in the Superstore, they were selling a T-shirt that said, "Finally, The Rock has come back to Las Vegas."
Yeah.
So if you're a fan who has been to the store and seen that shirt, I think the expectation is warranted and especially given the story that had been told with The Rock coming out at Bad Blood, at Netflix. We'll get into the match, and then I have more to say about The Rock. But I think expectations were justified that The Rock would be there.
Okay. When you look at it from that perspective, I think that we expected The Rock to be there. But again, they never said that he was going to be there. And I don't know if there was a fumble somewhere along the way. I've heard that there have been different power plays, and, it's The Rock versus Triple H as far as creative goes. I don't know. And this is part of the reason, not dangerous, but the part where you're dealing with people in Hollywood and different schedules and stuff. And I'm going to assume The Rock could have been there if he wanted to be there, or if they wanted him to be there.
I mean, allegedly he was in Hawaii on WrestleMania Sunday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And, Travis Scott, his entrance to WrestleMania was almost as long as the Randy Orton-Joe Hendry match. So I think that took a lot of people out of the moment.
Yeah, I think Undertaker was backstage being like, "Come on, son, hurry up, get to the ring."
So, but again, I get the reason why. I don't get Travis Scott because that's not my jam. Yeah. But he's got 10 or 15 million more followers on Instagram than WWE, the brand, the biggest wrestling brand in the world, one of the biggest brands in the world, has 15 fewer followers than Travis Scott does. So to me, again,
he did date a Kardashian, so maybe he's some left over.
So I get the involvement and why they want him there, and why he's put on this pedestal, if you will. But it just, as Hulk Hogan used to say, that doesn't work for me, brother. But that doesn't make it the worst WrestleMania in the history of WrestleMania. It was not my favorite, but it was also not my least favorite. So,
well, yeah, and I would go with John Cena's heel turn, while shocking and done well. There's something missing in the execution right now. And, I've seen like some comments of being like, "Oh, he just comes out with the boo-boo face and just frowning and pouty." And his wrestling, he's not doing a John Cena match, and he said that he's going to ruin wrestling, which if he, has a crappy match, then he's ruining wrestling. But that doesn't make it entertaining, I mean, I thought the match was fine for what it was, but I think also given last year's, main event, which we discussed, fans really enjoyed, I thought was overbooked to death and took away from the match. This one wasn't over, except for the fact that Travis Scott again took an hour to get down to the ring, and then here's this guy who's not a wrestler, who's looks to be about 150 pounds soaking wet. Why would Cody and the fact that Cody and Cena are just kind of waiting around, waiting, and then the end when Cody has the title and he's going to hit Cena with it, but then he's like, oh, he gets conflicted. It's like it kind of kills the Cody character that we've seen over the last couple of years. And so, I think overall, I think just the ending of the match was not done well. And we've said the last thing on the card is what you remember most. And so if it's bad,
right.
And again, I'm going to compare it to the AEW Revolution show, which had the bad main event of Cope and Moxley, where they said if that match would have went on in the middle of the show and you put any other match on that show at the end, that show would have been praised. But because that was the end match, it tears down the show. So, yeah, I just don't think I think the ending could have been done better. And I think, again, expectation, did anybody really believe Cody was going to win?
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, we are well over an hour into this. What do you see next? Raw and SmackDown provided some new faces, some returning faces. This Paul Heyman faction, Paul Heyman guys. Will Becky Lynch join that crowd? What do you think we're going to see in the weeks to come?
Okay. Well, before I get that, I want to finish my WrestleMania. So I want to, and maybe this will be a quick thing. We can discuss it later on another show. I feel, we talked about The Rock not showing up. Mm-hmm. I think The Rock is hurting WWE because are you getting The Rock or are you getting Dwayne Johnson when he shows up? And I don't know if you saw the Pat McAfee interview where he talked about things where he kind of shit on the ending as well. And it was like, oh, I didn't agree with that. And it's like, well, but you were the catalyst for the story. Mm-hmm. Why isn't there better conversation? Yeah. Why weren't, if he was in Hawaii just on a family day, why couldn't he be at WrestleMania? Is there a power play? And when he shows up, which one are you getting? Are you getting final boss or are you getting board member? And, I think this plays into there's the new Netflix series Unreal coming out where WWE is just completely taking away kayfabe, which granted kayfabe's been dead for 20 years at least.
Yeah.
But is it taking too much away to where, we've talked about before, when you go to see a Tom Cruise movie, you're not seeing Tom Cruise, you're seeing the character in the movie.
Right.
When it comes to wrestling, there's that line is being blurred, but now it seems to be taken away.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's too much. I like going to see a magician and being, like, how did he do that? And I think that part of this is going to take that, because we talk about being surprised. We want to be surprised. We don't want so-and-so to say, oh, well, we saw John Cena at the airport where the Royal Rumble is being held, so he's going to be a mystery entrant, or you know what I mean? Yeah. We want that surprise factor, and we're losing that more and more.
And I guess also with The Rock, I can't think of what his name is, but he's one of the hosts of the Busted Open radio show.
Oh, Dave LaGreca.
And he went off on a rant, and then The Rock's response was, "Dude, it's a work,
right?
Bro, don't you know? Like, come." And it's like, yeah, but the whole point, again, like you said, is the suspension of disbelief. Mm-hmm. I want to believe. And if you're telling me like, hey, don't believe anything you see because,
right.
I don't know. I from the moment he showed up at the Netflix Raw, I feel like there's been a disconnect, and that's ruined the story, especially after the story of last year. And now he comes out on Netflix and like, hey, Cody Rhodes, we're best friends here. Let's drink some vodka. And, I think for me, I think The Rock needs to go away and stay out of this title, to stay out of the storyline if he can't be committed 100%.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, again, where we come into the problem of celebrities or part-timers or, retired stars, the commitment level and where they can and can't be. Because I do think that part of this WrestleMania was hurt also by the fact that Cena wasn't at Raw every week.
Well, he should have been on SmackDown since he was
battling
for the SmackDown title. But
keeping that story going, if he's not there, out of sight, out of mind, even though they can run their packages or they could do this, that, and the other. Yeah, it hindered it. It hurt it a lot.
We've seen that in the last year with last couple of years with Roman Reigns. And I think that's, also an issue. But you asked about Paul Heyman, Raw. I am curious to see where that faction goes, who they add. Hopefully it will not be Austin Theory, because I still don't think he's up to snuff. I think it should be Dominic Mysterio should join them. That would be awesome. To kick Seth out just to a whole second generation stable. But I think they tried that once. Didn't go too well. But no, I'm curious. I mean, do you think they'll add Becky?
I mean, I gotta believe that they're going to. I can't imagine them not at, because what was the point of turning her heel then?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think isn't Lyra Valkyria typically on Raw with the
Hmm.
Intercontinental Championship?
Yeah.
So I feel like this is kind of a setup for her to either give her some shine like Tiffany and Charlotte, or for her to become the women's Intercontinental Champion.
Yeah. What I like about the Heyman faction is you can tell online kind of age groups of wrestling fans because it's either, oh, the new evolution or the new dangerous alliance.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So,
Anything else you want to add before we wrap up this week's episode?
no.
All right, friends. Well, stick around. No telling what we'll talk about next, but we appreciate you checking out this week's podcast on video or on audio form, and we will see you next time.